Okay, so today we are diving into Energize Your Mind.
By Gaur Gopal.
Yeah, by Gaur Gopal. And this is going to be really interesting because I feel like this book is a blend of ancient wisdom, but also modern psychology.
It is a fascinating blend, and what makes it even more fascinating is that he's not just a monk.
Right.
He's an electrical engineer.
Yeah.
So he brings that perspective to this, very ancient wisdom, and he can explain it with logic and with clear examples.
Yeah, and he uses a lot of humor, too.
He does.
And he uses anecdotes from his own life.
Yes.
And I think that makes it, really click.
Yeah.
When you can hear it from someone who's like, okay, this is how this stuff actually plays out in real life. And so he talks about everything from AI humanoids to crowded airports, which we're going to get into.
Yes.
A little bit of Bollywood in there too, which I always appreciate.
Mm-hmm.
But he starts off with this really interesting story about Sophia.
Oh, yeah.
The AI humanoid.
Yeah.
She's modeled after Queen Nefertiti.
Modeled after Nefertiti, and he met her at the Masters of the Century conference in Singapore.
Yeah.
And
it's wild.
He gave a presentation.
I know. She was a lifelike presentation.
A lifelike presentation.
But it's so interesting to think about, and this is kind of where he starts the book.
Yeah.
Is this contrast between, Sophia, who can give this flawless presentation because it's all pre-programmed.
Yeah.
But you're kind of missing that human element.
Yeah, and that's actually the point he makes. He said that, the human speakers at the conference, there's a certain dynamism.
Yeah.
A spark.
Connection.
That she just didn't have.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't really intelligence. It was just, really good programming.
Yeah, and so that kind of leads to this question of what does it mean to be human?
Exactly.
What does it mean to be sentient?
Yeah. And what he does is he kind of flips the script on how we've traditionally looked at our emotions. And he says, that's actually what makes us special.
Right.
Our ability to experience this wide range of emotions, from joy to grief to frustration to hope.
Yeah.
And he even includes this really extensive list of emotions in the book. It's almost like a vocabulary lesson for our inner world.
Yeah.
Because he's saying we need to get really precise and specific with the language we use to describe what's going on inside.
Yeah, and we try so hard to suppress all these emotions.
Yeah.
Right. We don't want to feel the bad stuff. We just want to feel happy all the time.
Exactly.
But he's kind of saying, no, you have to embrace all of it.
Embrace all of it because that's what makes you human.
Yeah.
And by acknowledging those feelings, you're actually able to start processing them more effectively.
And he calls this mental metabolism, right?
Yes, he does.
Which I love.
Yes. So he says, just like our physical bodies need to metabolize food for energy, our minds need to learn how to process our emotions effectively.
So we have to digest those emotions.
You have to digest those emotions. And just like some people have a faster or slower metabolism,
right,
we all have different capacities for handling emotional ups and downs.
Yeah.
Some of us can bounce back from setbacks really quickly, while others might need more time to process and heal.
Totally. So then how do we get better at this mental metabolism?
Well, that's where he introduces his central framework for mastering those emotions, and that's his feel, deal, heal method.
Okay.
And this method, it's not about eliminating difficult emotions altogether, because that's impossible.
Right. We're humans.
Yeah.
We're going to have all the feelings.
We're going to have all the feels.
Yes.
But it's about approaching them with more awareness and skill.
Okay.
So we can kind of move through them in a healthier way.
So it's instead of just being knocked over by the wave of emotion.
Yes.
You're okay, I'm going to ride this wave.
Yeah. You're going to learn how to surf those emotional waves.
I like that. I like that a lot. Okay, so tell me more about this. So feel, deal, heal, break it down.
So he actually compares it to this Indian concept called Jugaad.
Okay.
Which is all about this resourceful problem solving. So if your mosquito net has a hole in it, you don't just throw it away. You find a creative way to fix it.
Okay.
You work with what you have to find a solution.
Resourceful.
Resourceful. And that's the key. So how do we apply that to our emotions?
Yeah.
The feel part is crucial. It's about accurately identifying what you're experiencing in that moment.
Okay.
So are you feeling anxious, overwhelmed, disappointed? Just name it.
Okay. So we've got to name it to tame it.
Exactly. Don't judge it. Just name it.
Okay. So once we've identified the feeling, then what?
That's where the deal phase comes in. Okay.
Right. Okay.
It's about understanding the why behind the feeling. What triggered it?
Oh, cool.
What are the thoughts going on in your mind?
So it's about getting curious about our emotions rather than just being reactive to them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So once you understand the root cause, you can start to explore potential solutions. And then the heal part is where we take action, right?
Okay.
This final stage is about addressing the long-term impact of our emotions.
Okay.
It's not a quick fix. It's a process of healing those emotional wounds.
Okay.
Just like you would tend to a physical injury.
Okay. So you're not just putting a Band-Aid on it. You're actually going deeper.
Yes, you're addressing the root cause so you can truly heal and move forward. And he even uses this funny story about, he was on a flight.
Right.
And he got the coveted emergency exit seat.
Oh, nice.
All that leg room.
Right.
But the catch was he couldn't recline his seat for the entire 9-hour flight.
Oh, no.
And he was like, really?
The irony.
I know. But he uses it to illustrate a point. Right.
Right.
Life is a duality.
Okay.
There's good and bad in pretty much everything.
Yeah.
It's about acknowledging both. Instead of getting fixated on just the one, like in this case, he couldn't recline his seat, but he had all that leg room.
That's very true.
So it's about perspective.
Yeah. So it's about like, okay, this part isn't ideal, but look at this other great thing that I have.
Exactly. And that shift in perspective can be so powerful because it's about training your mind to focus on what you have.
Right.
Rather than what you lack.
Yeah. So it's really about gratitude.
It is about gratitude. It's about shifting that focus and appreciating, what we do have rather than constantly looking at what we don't have or what other people have.
Which is so easy to do, especially in today's world. Like, hello, social media.
Yeah, FOMO is a real thing.
Oh, my
The
gosh.
fear of missing out.
Yes. Like, it's constant. You're bombarded with images of people living their best lives, traveling to these exotic destinations, eating delicious food. And it's like,
And they're always happy in the pictures.
always happy.
Right.
Yeah. Which we know is not real life.
No.
But it's easy to get sucked into that, right?
Yeah.
And it's interesting because Gaur Gopal he doesn't dismiss this as like a millennial problem or anything. He doesn't say, oh, you guys and your phones.
Right.
He actually digs deeper, right?
Yeah.
He's like, this is a human thing.
It's a human thing.
This desire to belong.
Yes, this need for connection. And he even talks about a time when he experienced FOMO.
Oh, really?
As a monk.
A monk.
A monk.
Okay, I want to hear about this. So he was like, back in the day, before he was super well known.
Right. He was a young monk, just starting out.
Yeah.
And he talks about how he initially felt left out.
Okay.
Because his teacher was being invited to all these events and he wasn't included.
Oh, no. So even monks get FOMO.
Even monks get FOMO.
That makes me feel a little bit better.
We're all human.
We're all human.
Dealing with those same feelings.
We all feel like we're not enough sometimes.
Exactly.
We all compare ourselves.
Yeah.
So it's kind of reassuring in a way, right?
It is reassuring.
Like, if a monk can feel that way, then
you're in good company.
I'm in good company. Okay.
And it's not just about comparing ourselves to others. It's about recognizing that we all have our own unique paths.
Yeah, and that's where that whole comparison thing, like, gets us in trouble.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. We start looking at what everyone else is doing or what they have.
Yeah.
And we lose sight of our own blessings.
Yeah. So how do we escape that comparison trap? Like, how do we actually deal with FOMO in a healthy way?
Well, Gaur Gopal has some really practical strategies, and one of the things he talks about is focusing on the present moment.
Okay.
Because think about it. Have you ever noticed how FOMO often involves
The past or the future?
Exactly.
Yeah.
You're either ruminating about a better time or stressing about what you're missing out on next.
Yeah. It's always like, what if or if only.
Yeah.
Right? It's never like right here, right now.
Exactly.
This is great.
It's always our minds are somewhere else, but when we bring our attention back to the here and now,
Yeah.
that's when we can start to appreciate the good things that we might be taking for granted.
Okay. I like that a lot. It's like, don't miss out on your life because you're too busy scrolling through someone else's.
That's a good one. Yeah, and it's so true because when we're constantly looking at what everyone else is doing, we miss out on the beauty and the joy that's right in front of us.
So true. So we talked about focusing on the present moment.
Yeah.
What else can we do?
Well, he also emphasizes finding fulfillment in meaningful things.
Okay.
And this is key because oftentimes our FOMO is fueled by this pursuit of external validation and fleeting pleasures.
Right. It's like we're chasing after the next, like, dopamine hit.
Exactly. But true joy, it comes from within.
So it's about finding that inner contentment.
Yes. And that comes from connecting with our values, pursuing our passions, nurturing our relationships.
Okay. So we've got focusing on the present moment. We've got finding fulfillment in those things that truly matter. Any other FOMO-busting tips from Gaur Gopal Das?
Gratitude.
Oh, gratitude.
It sounds so simple, right?
Yeah.
But it's powerful.
It is powerful.
Because when we intentionally take the time to appreciate the good things in our lives, no matter how small, it shifts our entire perspective.
It really does.
Yeah.
It's like training your brain to look for the good.
Exactly.
Instead of focusing on what's missing.
Yeah.
Okay, so all of this is great, but I'm not going to lie, sometimes it feels like a lot of mental work.
Oh, it is.
You know, it is mental work.
Like, how do we actually quiet those negative thought patterns?
Yeah.
Create more space for these positive practices?
Well, he has this really relatable analogy.
Okay.
Imagine the panic and stress of losing a child in a crowded airport.
Oh, my gosh.
Right.
Yeah.
Your heart would be racing. Your mind would be swirling with worry.
Totally.
That's what it's like when our minds are running wild with anxiety, fear, or negative self-talk.
Like our thoughts become this runaway train,
Yes.
and we're just like holding on for dear life.
Exactly.
Okay. So what do we do if our minds are like that lost child in the airport?
Well, he suggests we need to learn how to parent our own minds. Parent our own minds.
Yeah. And he offers 4 principles for managing that mental chatter.
Okay, I like this. Parenting our minds.
Yeah.
I'm into it.
Yeah.
So what's principle number 1?
Neglect. Neglect.
I know it sounds harsh,
Yeah.
but it's not about ignoring our emotions altogether.
Okay.
It's about choosing not to engage with those unhelpful thoughts that just spiral us further down a negative path.
So it's like instead of getting caught up in those what if worries or those critical voices in our heads,
Right.
we can choose to just observe those thoughts without judgment and let them pass by.
Exactly.
Like you wouldn't give in to a toddler's every whim during a tantrum.
Exactly. Don't give those thoughts the attention they're craving.
Don't negotiate with terrorists or toddlers or your thoughts.
They're your thoughts.
Okay, so we've got neglect.
Yes.
What's number 2?
Number 2 is note it down.
Okay.
So if a thought feels particularly persistent,
Yeah.
he suggests actually writing down those thoughts
Oh, okay.
or worries.
Like journaling to get them out of our heads and onto paper.
Okay. So it's almost like you're giving those thoughts a designated space to hang out.
Yes.
So they're not constantly crowding your mental space.
Exactly. And sometimes that act of just externalizing them can help us see them more objectively.
That's so true. I love that. Okay. So we've got neglect and note it down.
Yep.
What are the other 2 principles for parenting our minds?
So the third one is negotiate.
Negotiate.
Negotiate. They might sound strange, but he gives this great example of how he used this technique to overcome his fear of skydiving.
Okay.
Before the jump, he actually had a conversation with his fear,
Oh, wow.
acknowledging its presence,
Okay.
but also reminding himself why he wanted to do this, why it was important to him.
Oh, that's so interesting. Okay, so it's about like having a dialogue with our anxieties
Yeah,
rather than letting them control us.
exactly.
It's like we're saying like, I see you fear,
Yeah.
I hear you, but I'm choosing to do this anyway.
Yes. And that act of acknowledging and validating our emotions can sometimes actually lessen their grip on us.
Okay, so we've got neglect,
Hmm.
we've got note it down,
Mm.
we've got negotiate. What is the 4th and final principle for managing that mental chatter?
The neutral observer.
The neutral observer.
Yes. This is where mindfulness comes in.
Okay, mindfulness. I knew we'd get to mindfulness at some point.
Of course.
We can't talk about mental wellness without talking about mindfulness.
Exactly.
Okay, so the neutral observer. Tell me more.
It's about learning to observe our thoughts and feelings without judgment, like we're watching clouds drift by in the sky.
Okay, so instead of getting caught up in the content of our thoughts,
Right.
we're simply noticing them arise and pass away.
Without getting swept away by them.
It's about creating a little space
Exactly.
between ourselves and our thoughts.
Yes. And it takes practice.
It does.
But even just a few minutes a day can make a world of difference. And he actually includes a simple mindfulness meditation in the book
Oh, nice.
that listeners can try.
We love a good practical tool.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we've got these tools for managing our minds, which is great because Lord knows we need them.
We do.
But, our minds aren't always the problem.
Okay.
Sometimes we're dealing with some heavier stuff.
Absolutely.
And Gaur Gopal Das doesn't shy away from these tougher topics either.
Yeah.
He actually dedicates a whole section to anxiety.
Yeah, he does.
And I love how he opens up about his own struggles with anxiety.
Yeah, he does.
Like, even though he's a monk,
Right.
you kind of think like, oh, monks, they just like meditate all day and they're always blissed out.
Right.
But he's very real about the fact that like he experiences anxiety too.
And he talks about it in a very relatable way.
Yeah, he does. He shares his experience overcoming his fear of skydiving in such vivid detail.
Oh, yeah. It's very visual.
I know. You can just picture him standing there at the open door of the plane, like heart-pounding, questioning everything.
Yeah. I'm getting nervous just thinking about it.
Me too. And I'm not even scared of heights. But I think that's what makes it so relatable.
It is.
Even if we're not all adrenaline junkies jumping out of airplanes,
right,
we've all felt that surge of anxiety before.
Yeah. Whether it's a big presentation, a first date, or even just navigating a really stressful situation.
Totally. So how did he do it? How did he overcome that fear? Did he just take a deep breath and jump?
Well, he talks about how he used that negotiate technique that we were just talking about.
Right.
Having that internal dialogue with his fear.
So he was like talking himself off the ledge, so to speak.
In a way, yeah. But he also highlights this really important concept called anxiety reappraisal.
Anxiety reappraisal. Okay, anxiety reappraisal. Tell me more.
So it's this idea that instead of trying to eliminate anxiety altogether, which often doesn't really work and can sometimes even backfire, he says we can actually choose to reframe how we view that anxiety.
Okay.
So he points out that the physical sensations of anxiety, like the racing heart, the sweaty palms, those are actually very similar to the physical sensations we feel when we're excited.
That's so true. It's just our interpretation of it. No.
Exactly. It's all about how we're framing it in our minds. So it's like instead of thinking, oh, no, I'm freaking out, we can shift our perspective and be like, wow, I'm actually really pumped about this.
Yes. I love that. So we're essentially tricking our bodies into feeling more confident and capable.
In a way, yeah, it's about harnessing that nervous energy and channeling it into something positive. But he also acknowledges that, sometimes we need more than just a positive affirmation or a deep breath to navigate those overwhelming emotions.
For sure, especially when we're dealing with something as complex as anxiety or other, mental health challenges.
Exactly. And he talks about a time in his own life when he was struggling, and he actually sought professional help.
Really? You went to a therapist?
He did. And he talks about how important it was for him.
Wow. See, that's what I love about Gaur Gopal Das. He's so real and relatable.
He is. He's not afraid to be vulnerable and share his own struggles.
Yeah. Because I think sometimes we have this idea that, someone like a monk who's dedicated his life to helping others shouldn't have these kinds of problems.
Right, like they should be above it all.
Yeah, but the reality is we're all human.
We are all human.
And it's okay to ask for help.
It really is. And he talks about how it's actually a sign of strength and self-awareness to recognize when we need support.
That's so important. It's like we don't have to go through this journey alone.
We don't. And he tells this really interesting story to illustrate this point. He talks about a hunter who accidentally shot a jackal on this piece of land that was forbidden to hunt on.
Uh-oh.
So he panicked.
Yeah, I bet.
And instead of facing the consequences of, admitting what he had done, he hides the dead jackal in his coat.
Oh, no.
And of course, the jackal starts to decompose, and it starts to smell really bad, and it's biting him.
Oh, my gosh.
But he would rather endure that pain and suffering than face the consequences of his actions.
Wow, that's kind of a dark story, but I get it. Like, we can't just stuff our anxieties and struggles away and pretend they don't exist.
Exactly. They'll just keep gnawing at us.
Yeah, like that jackal in the coat. So it's about opening up, right?
It is. Letting that jackal out of the coat.
And finding people we trust who can offer support and guidance.
Exactly. And he emphasizes that the support can come from so many different sources.
Right. Like friends, family.
Friends, family, mentors, therapists, support groups. The key is to find those people that you really connect with.
People who make you feel safe and heard.
Yes. And sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is simply listen with empathy and understanding. He tells this really poignant story about a woman that he met at a temple who was overcome with grief after losing her husband.
Oh, wow.
And he talks about how we often try to offer solutions or advice when someone is hurting.
Yeah.
But sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is just be fully present with them.
Listen without judgment.
Exactly. Just offer our empathy and understanding. He has this great line where he talks about taking off our sandals and putting on their Yeezys.
Okay, that's a good one.
It's about recognizing that everyone's experience is unique.
Right. And what might seem like a small problem to me could be a huge deal to someone else.
Exactly. And approaching every interaction with that compassion and understanding.
So it's not about fixing, it's about being there.
Exactly. Just being present.
That's so powerful. Gaur Gopal also talks about the importance of our words, right?
Yes. And how much power they have. He tells this fascinating story about the tree whisperers of the Solomon Islands.
Tree whisperers. Okay, I've got to hear this. What are tree whisperers?
So according to legend, the islanders, they don't cut down trees with axes or saws.
Okay.
Instead, they gather around a tree that they want to remove and they just hurl insults at it for hours.
No way. They yell at the tree. What do they say?
They curse at it. They tell it how worthless it is.
That's kind of mean, actually. But I bet there's a bigger message here.
Exactly. He's illustrating the power of words. He's saying that our words have the power to build up or tear down, to heal or to harm.
Right. Our words have a real impact.
They do. And it's not just about being nice. It's about being mindful, thinking before we speak, and really considering the impact our words will have on others.
Yeah, it's about choosing our words carefully and consciously. And that ties into this idea of selflessness, right?
Yes, it does.
Which Gaur Gopal also talks about in Energize Your Mind.
He does. And he uses the analogy of a Russian nesting doll, the matryoshka, to describe the different layers of our being.
Oh, I love those dolls. You open one up and there's another one inside and another one and another one.
Exactly. He's saying that we are made up of all these different layers too. And it's important to nurture all of them, but we also need to be aware of how they interact with each other and with the world around us.
Okay, I'm really liking this analogy. Tell me more about these layers.
Well, he talks about the 5 koshas, which are the 5 layers of being described in ancient Indian philosophy. The first layer is the physical body, the Annamaya kosha.
That's like the most obvious one, right? It's the layer we can see and touch.
Exactly. And then there's the pranamaya kosha, which is our energy body.
Okay, our life force energy, the breath that sustains us.
Yes. And then we have the manomaya kosha, our mental body.
Our thoughts, our emotions, our memory.
Exactly. And then there's the vijnanamaya kosha, our wisdom body.
The part of us that can discern, that can intuit, that can understand.
Yes. And finally, the innermost layer, the Anandamaya kosha.
Our bliss body.
Yes, our true self.
That's the part of us that's connected to something bigger than ourselves.
Exactly. And Gaur Gopal argues that when we understand these layers, and we recognize that we are more than just our physical bodies, more than just our thoughts and emotions,
right,
we can start to tap into a deeper sense of purpose and connection.
That's expanding our definition of who we are.
Exactly, and recognizing that we're all connected.
And that our actions have this ripple effect, right?
Yes. He tells this incredibly moving story about a businessman who is on the verge of bankruptcy.
Oh, no.
Feeling completely hopeless, he encounters a kind stranger who listens to his troubles and offers him a check to help him get back on his feet.
Wow, that's amazing. Who was this stranger?
Well, the check was signed by none other than John D. Rockefeller.
No way. John D. Rockefeller, like the richest man in the world, John D. Rockefeller.
The one and only.
Wow.
But here's the really interesting part.
Okay.
The businessman, he never cashed that check.
Really? Why not?
Because he realized it wasn't about the money.
Okay.
It was the act of kindness and belief that someone saw his potential and believed in him that gave him the strength to turn his business around.
That is so powerful. It's a good reminder that sometimes the most valuable gifts we can give and receive aren't material possessions, but those intangible gifts of encouragement, support, and belief in one another.
Exactly. And that's really the heart of what Gaur Gopal is talking about in Energize Your Mind. It's about cultivating that inner strength, that inner peace, so we can show up for ourselves and for others in a more authentic and compassionate way.
It's about recognizing our interconnectedness.
Yes.
And using our unique gifts and talents to make a positive difference in the world. This has been such a great conversation.
It has.
I always love diving into these topics with you.
Me too.
And I hope our listeners are feeling energized and inspired to apply some of these principles in their own lives.
Me too. Remember, even small changes can make a big difference.
So true. Thanks for joining us for another deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
And until next time, keep those conversations about mental wellness going.